Should we go around and introduce everyone? Why don't you start?
Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Denise Kolpak, City Commission.
Yeah, tell it, go out, turn screen.
There you go. Randy Thorson, downtown business owner.
Dave Pepcorn, City Commission.
Perry Gayhart, Finance Director for the city.
Judy Lewis, Fargo Moorhead Community Theater.
Adrienne Olson, Kilbourne Group.
Keith Lear, Kilbourne Group.
Mike Almendinger, Kilbourne Group.
Arla Preston, City Commission.
Eric Johnson, Assistant City Attorney.
I'm Jim Gilmore with the City of Fargo. What I'd like to do today first is to kind of give a little background on why we started doing these mixed-use parking ramps downtown, how we got started in this. Quickly go through an example of Roberts Commons and see how that one turned out, but then really try to spend as much time as needed to get you to understand the project and see if you have any questions on that. And then I'll kind of wrap it up on some of the disciplinary ideas on how to finance the project. I'm meeting with Terry and Mike Redlinger later today just to see if there's other financing options for the city's share of this. So to start with, it was in 2014. I remember Commissioner Pepcorn was on the commission, and after a kind of a trip we took down to Lincoln, Nebraska, and saw some mixed-use parking ramps down there, we did a site study to see what sites in Fargo might work. And so we looked at 7 different sites. You can see here where Roberts is now was that 2nd Avenue site, and then what's labeled as Warner, because they had owned the property at the time, was turned into Mercantile. The other sites that were looked at included this NP site, which were seen as good sites, as well as the trying to add on to the Civic Center ramp because that was such a popular site attached to the hotel and the Skyway. 2 other sites, the St. Mark's site was really too small and not really that close to Broadway. And the City Hall parking lot site was also seen as too distant from Broadway, as well as the logistical problems with utilities and lift stations and pipes that go underground near that site. Again, quickly going through this Roberts example, and we'd be doing something similar on this site. We first put together a plan for renewal. I identified that, the site was really underutilized, didn't look that great, and was just surface parking. At that time in 2015, the total property taxes paid on that was only $2,100. Much of it was publicly owned, didn't pay anything, and the city share of that was $367. We put together a renewal plan, kind of following on that site study. This was one concept for how a parking ramp could fit on that site. Because we controlled the entire site, we were able to do an RFP. I think we received 3 proposals from developers and then selected Kilbourne Group to do a project there. We bonded for and built the parking garage. This is the entrance along Roberts, named Roberts Commons Garage. The cost was at that time $13 million. We borrowed $10 million GO bonds and had $3 million in the parking fund. The private development that came along later, when we did the development proposal, we were sort of guaranteed that ROCO portion since Kilbourne owned that property, and they had also agreed to build on the Kessler site, although we only own the northern portion of that site. They acquired that and made the building larger than was required. In addition, the Dillard property came up for sale. They acquired that, built another housing project, which is attached to the ROCO garage and uses that for their parking. The new development that was spurred was $43 million in those 3 private buildings, not including what the city spent on the parking garage. The final portion now is these Renaissance Zone exemptions expire. The city will be receiving about $505,000 a year that will pay a portion of the parking bonds. I think the parking bonds are about $765 a year. So between that and what we make on the parking that fully pays those bonds once these Renaissance zones expire, and actually gives us some money for these additional facilities. When this closes in 2036, I guess about 14 years from now, the property taxes will be $600,000 a year. The city share of that will be $114,000, and the parking fund will continue to earn probably about $400,000 a year off that Roberts ramp, which will go to pay for these other parking facilities. The benefits of this is that, you know, we eliminated that blighted surface parking lot, get more parking downtown. There's 454 spaces. I think the city only had a little over 100 and maybe 150 on the surface at that time. There are 15 new businesses, you know, 265 new housing units. Building permit revenue was $250,000, and then of course there's that long-term property tax increases, which gets us back to this NP garage. In February of this year, we came up with a concept that the City Commission took a look at and asked us to, or kind of gave us the go-ahead to start working on another mixed-use development. We were looking at actually a larger number of housing units and a larger, you know, facility, just with costs and the trying to get that much onto the site. It really wasn't financially feasible for either the parking ramp or the housing. So we took a step back. We had a consultant do another parking study. They think long-term the need is more likely 480 spots at this site. We've been researching some TIF potential and talking with Baker Tilly. And then Fargo Moorhead Community Theater was added as a partner, which was a real benefit because one of the hardest things to lease out actually is, you know, commercial space that isn't on Broadway. You know, if you're on Broadway, most of that space is full. If you go off Broadway a little bit, it's less popular, I guess. And then the apartment building was also, they reduced the floor on that to make that more feasible. And so the ownership overview of this project at this point would be the community theater would have about 400 seats. Global development would have about 50,000 square feet. Kilbourne would have the apartments. The city would have a parking garage. And then there's also potential for future redevelopment, just as we saw with Roberts. Other surface parking in the area may redevelop. This is the overall site. I'll get you some handout. These are just pretty hard to read and how they're masked, but
Jim, can you just go back to the slide on the parking lot? What is it the city owns and what is it the Thorson Group owns as far as the parking lot?
if I can get the mouse to work. So the city owns this western portion from about this line over to this line. It's kind of hard to see that red line. So the city owns this portion of the parking lot. Global Development, Old Broadway, Randy own this portion. We have just under 150. I think they have just under 100 parking spots on the ground. So these
So
properties,
it'd be hard to do an RFP. I mean, you have to look at who's in the land site now. If you did an RFP for somebody else coming in there, is that right?
yeah, it would be. I mean, I visited with Randy earlier, and you know, we were actually talking to a different development company that was going to put up an office building there several years ago. That they went elsewhere, but I asked Randy if we'd want to jointly do an RFP, and he did not want to do that. So I'll let you address that.
So they each, okay. I'll learn. I'm a quick study. The city owns 60% of that lot. We own 40%. But I think what's also important to note is that we own the alley that goes all the way around, because that's very, very, very important to the development of the entire property. To exit out of the rear even for that parking garage. So it's really, if you look at all of the property there, it's really about 50-50. With the use of the entire facility or the entire piece of property. So, and we did look at talking with other developers, but for us, our involvement in conversations with the Kilbourne Group have been good over the years, and we've seen their projects downtown, and so that's who we want to deal with, and we believe that this project will get done, and it'll be just another great project by the Kilbourne Group, so we're excited about that.
And I know one of the commissioners, Eric, had a question about, do you need to do something like that? And you looked into the rules about that. What are the rules about working with a partner and not doing an RFP?
Right. We're accustomed in city government, any public body, and probably any state in the union, but certainly North Dakota, to go out for public bidding on construction projects and so forth. And that kind of competitive sale, even for selling publicly owned land. But North Dakota has what's kind of become known as a public-private partnership law, Chapter 4802.1, been, I think it was enacted in about 1981, so it's been on the books for a long time, hasn't really been utilized until probably the last 10 years or so in North Dakota. But that allows a governmental entity like the city to, you certainly can seek proposals, but you don't have to. You can just accept a proposal from an entity, or in this case, sort of multiple private entities, Randy's group and Kilbourne, and negotiate terms into a contract without having necessarily to have a public RFP process.
Thank you. Sorry, Jim.
Maybe we'll get into, I'd like Judy to talk about the Fargo Moorhead Community Theater, and then we'll follow up with Randy and some of your thoughts on the Herbst building.
Excellent, thank you, Jim. I think that moving here, I've only been here since 2019, and this has very quickly become my favorite place of all the places that I have lived. I am I plan to never leave. You're stuck with me. I can't believe how much art there is here and how much opportunity. So when I look at that there used to be 17 theaters in downtown Fargo, it tells me how that happened, how we got here to loving art. Now there's only one. That's sad. Let's keep theater in downtown Fargo. Season 75, we engaged over 40,000 people in our space in the MCOMST, which is a huge number. It happens one little person at a time coming and participating on Saturdays. Can you flip to is there a next, hit next? Thank you. On Saturdays right now, we are only limited by our space. In the tiny classroom that we have, we serve 102 students every single Saturday. And those kids don't bring themselves to our studio. They come with adults, they come with other family members, they come with other children. So it's between 200 and 300 people who we bring to our rehearsal space every Saturday. When we have our theater, and I hope that we will, I hope that I'm not more excited than the people who run our city about this space, because it will bring people every single day, families. Like right now we have businesses, we have, boutiques, we have bars, we have restaurants, all those things are so important to a downtown. But the families, the people who come, the people who we bring, who feel ownership there, are the balance that the city needs. And I'm a very civic-minded person. I love being a part of that. I love being a part of building my community. And I feel like for FMCT, it's an incredible gift to be in that space downtown. But for the city, it's an incredible gift, the people who we bring there. And sadly, if we don't get this building, if we don't get this opportunity, we're going to have to leave downtown Fargo. I don't see another opportunity for us, and I don't want to leave. I want to stay forever and have this beautiful theater there and bring our families.
Wow, I would like to clap. For me, it's been from the time with the Renaissance Zone began and the development of our block and the railroad selling of the land. So it goes back a long, long time. The railroad sold land. We were buying the land, our group, Global Development, Warren and I, and we bought the parking lot along the tracks. And then we swapped with the city when Mayor Furness was here. was mayor, and we ended up with the property we ended up with. We ended up doing the development and selling off buildings to the different developers along that block, and now to look at it and to come back and say, okay, now we finally, the ultimate is the development of that parking lot and doing something with that backside of these buildings. And so I'm really excited about it. We have, the Herbst building, which is, if you count the basement, we're about 50,000, maybe a little bit more than 50,000 square feet. We've looked at many, many, many ideas and to redevelop that facility. So what you see on the screen right now is one of the ideas was for the boutique hotel. So we're still looking at that. We're looking at even special events center. We're looking at a combination of both. We've got some other ideas for the facility as well. So we're really looking at what the traffic generators are going to be for us to move forward. The parking garage itself is a traffic generator because they walk right by the old Broadway. The old Broadway has been under development for almost a year now, redevelopment of the club and now the restaurant, and that's a whole new business model. Because of the changes in the downtown area, we're able to change our business model and the style of food and things that we're going to do there. So hopefully we'll be done with that part of it by the end of this year. So we're looking at doing a development. We're looking at what the traffic generators are and are going to be in the downtown area, and that really determines what we will do, what we will develop, but I can assure you that we will develop. We've been waiting for this opportunity for a long, long time. We've kept that parking lot in back. We probably only use 30 or 40 right now of those parking spots, but the city has run that for us over the years that we've owned that land. And so really, I'm really just interested in getting that area developed. And I have to tell you, what's really, really hard to do, and what was really, really hard to do in the beginning was to get consensus, with the other property owners of how we were going to develop our block when the Renaissance Zone, started up. And because of our opportunity with the railroad, we had the Y on Broadway, we had the Woolworth building at the end of the block. And so we were in the Woolworth building with our CI apparel at that time, and so we were given that opportunity to buy that piece of land. And then when the Y on Broadway didn't want their land, we were able to buy that. They didn't need the parking lot that they were leasing and back, so we had an opportunity to buy that. And so all of this happened in order for us to develop that entire front of the block. So we were only selling to developers that we're going to do something with those properties. And of course, the Y on Broadway has become a condominium project, and very expensive condos in there. Precision Dental Lab is in the Woolworth building. And of course, we have the Herbst building, which CI Apparel was in for years, which now has moved to the Gander Mountain building. So there's an opportunity there, but that opportunity to have the players in place, like FMCT, the Kilbourne Group, the City of Fargo, and our group, to get this done, it's really, really hard to get to that point. And we really need to take advantage of this because it's a great, great development project.
And you'll happily pay more taxes, Randy? Did I hear
You know
say
what?
that?
I was listening to you, Jim, when he said that. We were paying about the $5,000 a year. And I'm looking at what we have in downtown Fargo now that we've renovated. And I think we're up to $110,000. So, that's what does happen. And, I'm always looking for an advantage, but, it's in business, you have to have that. But it's good to be in a high traffic area with your businesses. That's how you can afford to pay those taxes. So it's been good for us.
I think, Keith, you're going to talk about the apartments and kind of the overall parking concept here.
Yeah, so on the Kilbourne Group side, a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the project here. So obviously, we're involved in helping bring the development together, working through the partnerships, understanding the intricacies of how all these, tremendous players play together and make this thing come to fruition. As we get down the road, we'll be involved in the construction of the project, but then also on the private side, being involved in the apartments side of this. So right now, we're looking at what would be a 6-story building, or similar to like the Mercantile project that we brought online. There's 5 stories of apartments over 1 story of commercial space, which would be the FMCT portion of the project. In this diagram up here, FMCT is sort of that kind of aqua color towards the bottom, and then back inside of this kind of courtyard area on the project. And then the residential component being this more clay color. There's 145 units within that. And then the parking project being the gray parking ramp structure in the back. On the apartment side, we're thinking right now, or I should say we're projecting right now, we're about $35 to $40 million of investment in the apartments. Studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms in here. And then depending on how the final ground floor program lays out with lobby space and pre-function space and things like that, we anticipate there being somewhere around 2,200 square feet of an independent retail space on the MP Avenue side of the project. This is targeted as a market rate project, so we're working within all the complexities of this project and how we're attacking it from a TIF financing standpoint and generating tax revenue to help with the city's side of this. So we are positioning this as a market rate project. You can see there studios starting somewhere in the 990 range, give or take, but then going up depending on the size of the unit for there, or the size of the unit within the project. I will note our current stabilized market rate projects, we're well over 95% occupied in those. We've brought on 3 buildings this year that are also market rate projects, and those are leasing up faster than what our projections were in this first year of the stabilization with those buildings. So we do see a high demand for market rate in downtown. That's something we've been successful with and we've done well, and so we're excited to bring these in this project as well. From a schedule standpoint, I know Jim's going to talk a little bit here about next steps, but at a high level, when we sort of put a shovel in the ground, the goal here is around the early summer of 2023. So we're working through the design phases of the project right now, obviously ironing out the rest of the programming, the development agreements, sort of the financing structures, those types of things. There's a level of contingencies Jim will talk about that we need to clear before we get to a break ground date. But hoping to start in this early summer. This will open in phases. Parking ramp we think will be somewhere around 13 to 14 months. So that's opening sort of midsummer of 24. At that time, there'll be a turnover with the FMCT for their core and shell space where they can start their fit out depending on their schedules. But we would expect the overall apartment side of the project to be done sort of kind of mid to late 2025. And then depending on the FMCT side of things, where their fit out lands, the level of finishes, those types of things, they'll be finishing there or shortly after, we would anticipate as well.
You'll be done in Christmas of '25?
100% yes.
The concepts I've been visiting with Baker Tilly about is, how do we, pay for this parking garage? The fortunate the theater has the money that they need, and Kilbourne is looking for investors for their apartments. And so the city's responsibility would be this parking garage that would cost an estimated $20 million. This is my idea for how to finance it. One would be the parking fund, using $4 million from the parking fund, which is the proceeds from the sale of the Island Park ramp and the parking lot that we have in 501 Main, where we're trying to finalize an agreement for that sale. Right now, parking fines go into the general fund, and there's some staff charges in planning that are paid from the parking fund. If we make those 2 budget changes, that would bring in another $281,000 a year for the long term into the parking fund. We've been looking for a way to add 69 parking spaces onto the Civic ramp. If we would use the riverfront TIF funds for that, that would generate about $100,000 a year more. That would, again, provide that revenue to pay off the bonds. We'd look at a new TIF district targeting 6 properties, including the ones you've heard about so far, and then bond for $16 million. The shortfall over the first 8 years would still be about $3.4 million. The additional TIF district, I'll show you what we have in mind there, includes the Kilbourne Apartments, FMCT, 14 Broadway, which is the Herbst Building, but then also 501 Main. We expect that to break ground next year, as well as the Bell Bank will be worth significantly more after they do their remodeling. You look further to the north, I've talked to one of the developers that owns 56 Broadway. You know, they're kind of watching this project and they anticipate filling that in. That's adjacent to the Fort Knox, where there was a fire 20 years ago, and I think we've been a vacant parking lot since then, as well as another parking lot to the west that I'm sure developers would seek to acquire if there were parking across the street. This is sort of how that shortfall would end up. The bulk of that is in years 2024 and 2025, when, you know, the revenue ramps up slow, and so some of this TIF money comes in later. You know, the years further out, that's a little harder to predict because we may be able to have some parking rate increases that would lower that amount. There could be increase in values of the buildings, which would increase that. And so there's a potential upside there. I suppose there's some downside to if somehow the parking didn't all get leased up. The next steps, and I'll pass this out. This is from Baker Tilly. It shows the bond for both. The first page, if you look at that far right, you'll see where that deficit is. But then when we get beyond that first 8 years, we have pretty good coverage of probably over $200,000 a year in income that parking fund would be coming out ahead. And so the case for sort of the long-term prospects look pretty good, but in the short term, there's definitely going to be a shortfall. The second page of this is the projections if we borrowed $3.5 million for the Civic ramp expansion. There's a shortfall that first year, but then the TIF revenue comes in real strong with a real strong coverage. You know, this I think could also be used for the proposed pedestrian bridge. You know, there'd be another stronger revenue stream. So in 2025, when that's being done, there's a capacity to borrow more from this TIF fund to do, you know, if we have a performing arts center someday and that bridge, then there'd be potential for TIF funds to pay for that. The other 4 pages, that's just when we had Tischler Weiss do an economic model that shows kind of the economic impact, secondary economic impact of all of these. It's not real strong on sales tax, but it's certainly additional economic impact in the town to just show you how we can use that tool. So the next steps, and we're looking at bringing this to you, and the meeting on October 31st would be to approve a public-private partnership agreement with Kilbourne. We would, probably not at that same meeting, but we'd also need a development agreement with Global Development. We would want to hire a parking ramp consultant to make sure that what's designed by our partner fits the needs of the city. That'd be someone who's worked for us. We've done that on the last 3 parking ramps that we've done. So we have someone with expertise in parking ramps to also look at those plans and help improve them. You need to establish that new renewal area and TIF district. There'd be a commitment in that development agreement that we would pay for the detailed design because, right now we're just dealing with an estimate. So this would be the detailed design to actually go out and get bids And how this works is, even though we hire this developer, they have to go and get multiple bids for each thing, so we know that it's, you know, being done competitively. It's not the same as the city's more cumbersome bidding process, but they do have to show us multiple bids. You'd have to approve that civic ramp expansion. Again, we need that additional revenue to kind of make this work, as well as get going on the bonding for the 16 million. So the final contingencies would be, we'd only move ahead at the very end, but if it comes in with a detailed design that the city's happy with, that's, you know, structurally sound and meets our criteria, if the cost is below 20 million, and if the bonds can be sold. So if we can't sell the bonds, if it comes in too high. So there's an out only if, you know, interest rates go way up, if costs are way up. At that point, the city could opt out of the project, but otherwise we'd be kind of opting in this month to follow it through, provided all these things work. Do I don't have anything else. I'd be happy to answer any questions on the financing. Again, I'd be meeting with Terry and Michael to see if, you know, maybe there's some other ways to finance this. Maybe they've got some money in a mattress someplace we could use.
Commissioner Pipgard.
So, Mr. Chair, I have a couple questions. First of all, could you give us an estimate of the number of days a year that you would anticipate the new facility being used?
363. I take Christmas Eve and Christmas Day off.
No, that's awesome, just the economic impact of that. And then if we could pull up a picture and show the overhead view, because the parking ramp isn't just being built for the apartments or the FM Community Theater, it's also, so if you look directly to the north, that lot where the Brannick lots are, and there's lots of buildings there that have potential to be developed. And if you have parking, that will have a positive influence. And I think from the ROCO and the other ramps that we built, they don't just service just that, they're servicing the other. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I mean, the surrounding businesses use the ramps, or Jim, whoever.
Yeah, maybe I can address that. I mean, that's sort of the ideal with Roberts, is what we see is that during the day, it's a lot of office workers. During the evening and nights, it's apartment dwellers. In the evening, people are going downtown. I was downtown on the Saturday, and I think I had to drive up to the 6th level to get a parking spot, you know, when that Red River Market is going on. You know, in this location, it's going to be used by NDSU students in the evening, patrons to restaurants, you know, and just people come downtown for parades. They're just seem to be busy all the time. I'm surprised at how many people go through the facilities in a day.
Can I just add one more? The other thing that's really neat, the NDSU Renaissance Hall is to the right on this picture. But if you look, there's that courtyard in between, and then also the FMCT is also going to have a courtyard. And so I think that's, for outdoor art, I think that's going to be a very appealing place. And so I think that's the whole area could be really upgraded a lot. And so to me, it's very exciting. And I do think it will have an influence on that, especially the block to the north, where there's all those buildings that some are in the process of being remodeled, but there's still some flat parking lots there that are potential, and people are already interested in being developed, but to have parking, I think would expedite it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could ask a couple of questions. One for FMCT. So the space that you would be in, would you own the space or lease it?
We would own it, which sets us up for the next 100 years. I mean, it really puts us in a great position.
So, Jim, if you can just clarify for me. So the property that the city currently owns is about, if I understood, 60% of the entire space?
Yes, without the alley.
And the alley would be vacated? Or,
No,
it looked like in one picture it was, but,
Yeah, the alley isn't a platted alley. It's actually owned by Kilbourne. It was never platted.
like Kilbourne?
Or you mean by Global,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Global.
And so what part of the agreement is, they would give us an easement so we could drive around the back. So
Okay,
it wouldn't be an
okay.
official alley, but that would be included in the project that I said.
So with the final project then, how much of the space is actually taken up with the parking ramp? I heard 50/50. Is that right?
No, I mean, the footprint, no, I don't think we're at
Yeah,
50.
the footprint by square footage of just the footprint of the building, the parking ramp is in the mid 40% range.
Okay,
And then the rest of the project's about 55% range.
okay. Okay.
Randy,
One
does
other
this
suggestion
get
I
the
would
beer
have-
trucks off Broad, or off NP? Does it get the beer trucks off there? Do they go into the alley to unload?
They can do that. I mean, for us, it's the reason why we're going to hold on to the alley too is, we're going to have our deliveries actually come in the back of the Herbst building because we have a freight elevator right there, so we'll be able to go in and bring our product in through that area. There's still, there's no parking until 11 a.m. for all of your deliveries of all the restaurants downtown. It's not just us. But they have no parking until 11, and then after that, it all opens up. Some of the other areas that we looked at, too, were some drop-off areas that really are on the NP Avenue in front of this parking lot. And I think they're doing that now. They're dropping off, for Uber drivers and a drop-off area. We've actually looked at that for on Broadway as well. I talked with Jeremy Gordon and his group maybe a couple weeks ago about the ability to do that there. So they're discussing that, but it will help clean up all of that. The alley is really important because you have to have the alley, even though nobody's paying for it. Everyone needs that alley, and for whatever services, the condos that are in the Y on Broadway, the old building, they use that alley. That's how they get into their garages. And I think also, Mike, we have to have it there for the fire department. It has to be able to make certain turns and get around. So there's a lot of reasons to keep that and just to utilize it that way. And we're all willing to do that.
So one of the concerns the police chief has had is the congestion outside of Old Broadway end of day. If we have the parking garage well, then a lot of the people just park in the garage and just
Sure.
walk over there, so they won't be out in the street. So basically going to the ramp and out.
Yeah, and one of the other things we did when we redid the club, we actually added a new lobby that goes into the zone, which holds about 45 people. So we'll be able to, we shut those doors now, so in the wintertime, we just can't put them out on the street, and that's what we had to do in the past. So there'll be people that, go out to their cars in this new parking garage and/or can wait inside for their Uber. They can wait for their ride to come up to the building. And so that's another way we've tried to take care of all of those people. We're also working, one of the concepts that we're doing inside the old Broadway is late night food service so that people aren't going out into the streets as much late night, and we'll be able to service a lot of those people right from the existing room changes that we're making at the old Broadway right now. So that'll go on all night. That's not just at late night. That'll be a service that we provide throughout the entire night. So we're trying to, we see what some of the problems are, and we're trying to fix some of those things as we redevelop. So we've gone slowly with it, but we can make our changes as we go slowly with this project.
I was going to add the alley that goes north-south, right between the Herbst building and the parking garage, or the proposed parking garage, is, remains pretty much as it is. But there will be a new alley that runs parallel to the railroad tracks, and that's going to service, that's going to provide the fire access service, and then also, the secondary exit out when and if it's needed to get to connect over to 8th Street. So that is a part of this project. And so that right of way along those tracks, are really needed from a code perspective.
So I had another follow-up question. So with the decrease in the city ownership, the parking ramp taking up about 40% of the space, will there be then a sale of that 20% to the current owners? And can that be put into the fund for paying for the parking ramp?
I mean, Yeah, right now, we've just negotiated that we're all throwing the land in, they're putting their land in alley and we're putting ours in, and there's no exchange. I mean, we have a little larger, but on the other hand, we're closer to Broadway with this particular site, so there's an advantage for us to move the ramp closer to Broadway because that's where people don't like to walk very far, so.
So that probably would be wise to spell out real clearly so that there's a real clear benefit, public benefit to that 20% transfer. The other thing that would be helpful, you lost me when you were talking about all the TIFs. And so that we understand fully, you talked about an expansion of a TIF. Are you talking the riverfront expansion or riverfront TIF being expanded, or?
No.
You lost me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost you there. There would be a new TIF.
Okay.
It would include this project as well as these other buildings down. The riverfront TIF is in place and would just be using that current stream of money.
So when you use the word expansion, what were you
The
meaning?
expansion, I think, was the addition onto the civic ramp.
Okay. I thought you talked about a TIF expansion, but maybe I heard you wrong.
Would it be, I think I had the word expansion in of the civic ramp with the current riverfront TIF. I must have misspoke there.
Okay, okay. So when you come with this, I think it would be terrifically important to be very clear about, you're talking about transferring from one TIF fund to another. It gets real mashed up and very difficult to follow, so.
Yeah, I think, Jim, on this, you need an outline of the TIF you're talking here. And to Commissioner Preston's question, so is the riverfront going to be used for the Civic Center and/or are we going to take this TIF and pay for the Civic?
No, this TIF would strictly be for NP.
Just
The
for that.
riverfront TIF would strictly be for the civic. There would be no change other than that the additional income that we'd earn from the civic expansion would go into the parking fund, which would then help fund the overall debt.
Which has some implications for the riverfront fund, that we would be losing those funds inside that TIF. So again, just walking through the TIFs and so that we fully understand where the dollars are going.
I think that's important because in the riverfront TIF, we have this long list of
Yes.
things. And so if we do one thing, that means there may not be money for one of the other things.
Exactly, exactly.
Any other comments? You know, it's really interesting in the city of Fargo, we find unique opportunities to have things happen. And tragedy in which you lost your facility, now we're trying to look at a new facility. But in that comes opportunities. And whenever we can partner, it seems like the city benefits. The ROCO is a marvelous addition that we've had. Mercantile is a great thing as well. But we have a little bit, in my mind, neglected Southside Broadway, where we need to continue to do that. Bell Bank is doing their thing. We're going to have another apartment complex come up. So, and always, Jim, we run into this parking thing, and I think we had one commissioner one time told me I never need parking ramps anymore because everybody's going to have an autonomous vehicle that picks them up and drops them off. But that doesn't look like it's coming in the next 5 years, so we may have need for this. But with the rejuvenation of the whole of downtown, this looks like a great project to help us get to that point. And Jim, I'm glad you at one time had this up to $10 million we had to find, so I'm glad we're down to the $3 million, and I hope somewhere we can learn how to generate money somewhere else. But, and Dave, we get to use part of that parking ramp revenue to help this out, which is great to have. But, and like Jim says, I've been downtown on a Friday or Saturday night, and it's hard to find a parking spot in our present parking ramps. So people are coming, it's happening. But I think this really is a great partnership for us to enhance the arts of the community, more living space. apartment complexes I've seen look fantastic. It's not me, but I like to have mow grass or something. But you guys have done a great job in your projects. Dave and I were just talking about that this morning, looking across from Beer Bombs, how that apartment complex came up. So I think, yeah, Jim, we need some clarifications of things so the commission can weigh in. And Commissioner Preston, you had one time asked that question, just as we did the budget, is where are we going in the future and what are we going to do? And this is another puzzle in the city that we have to figure out as a commission, but very good, thank you.
Just want to also kind of thank Margie Bailey for being here. When I was first working for the city, she was involved with redevelopment of the Fargo Theater, which has turned out great, and that second screen. And she also served on our parking commission many years, including when this study got going in 2014. So if you want more background on what we've done downtown, you catch Margie before she leaves.
Guys in line. But I love the public-private partnership. I love visioning and the synergy that this has the potential of creating. And there will be challenges with it, clearly. But I think all in all, and all is said and done, have a very positive impact. So it's my pleasure to be here.
Any other comments? Jim, are we done?
We're all done.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.